I do think that unambiguously, Donald Trump is going to be the best person. I said it on the debate stage, I think he's the best president we've had in the 21st century. People really turned their heads at that one. So wait a minute, let's just go down the list. George Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden. It's not even close. Who was the best president of the 21st century? It was Donald Trump. And that was in his first term. And I think in that second term, I truly believe he has an opportunity to go further because he has, like any human being would, learned a lot from that first term.
Do you have any apprehensions about Trump taking the presidency if he does? Let's take Biden out of the equation. I think the majority of the country knows he's incompetent or completely controlled, whatever. He's a disaster. He's a buffoon. Let's replace him with somebody that
I think there's a good chance, by the way, it's not going to be Biden for the reasons you mentioned. So as a side note, I think one mistake that we're all making, and I've shared my opinions with leaders in the Republican Party, I've shared my opinions with President Trump, is we got to be careful not to fall into this trap of complacency. I mean, you're a military guy. It's like the equivalent of a feint, right? You know, a feint is you lead your opposition to a target that's not the real target there's a real operation that isn't the one that you're being led to follow. Well, that's exactly, looks a lot like what's happening to me, is make the entire Republican Party's focus and platform and fundraising and everything focused on beating Biden. What a great way to get to July or August and then find out that actually all of that political, financial, and messaging capital was wasted. And you have 3 months before somebody who then actually doesn't go through a difficult vetting process to be the person they try to trot in. So put that to one side.
Who would they prop up?
I think Michelle Obama is not crazy. And
how would they do that without bringing Kamala in as president?
Well, I think that Michelle Obama actually is a great way around that problem, right? It'd be Joe Biden stepping aside for making Michelle Obama the nominee, which is how they solve their Kamala problem. And they have a Kamala problem right now is you got a black woman who is occupying the seat of #2 seat in a party that has defined itself based on race and gender identity politics.
Yeah.
So if they were to sideline her as the obvious #2 for someone like a Gavin Newsom that they bring in, I think they've bought themselves an identity politics problem. A white man for a white man, cis straight white man for a cis straight white male. Michelle Obama is a very elegant solution to that problem. And you could say so could be a Gretchen Whitmer, as long as you're checking one of the boxes. I think that they have enough air cover to do it, right?
Okay.
But I think that that would be the play. If it was Gavin Newsom, they could keep Kamala Harris in the VP seat. She may or may not go for that, but that assumes that she and Joe Biden have any say in the matter. I mean, part of what you're seeing with the Hunter investigations, with a lot of the other investigations swirling around Joe Biden is part of that's leverage, right, that they have on him behind closed doors. And maybe less relevant is not just Joe, but also Jill, who is probably the figure who's even more emphatically committed to making sure that Biden doesn't move. And there's also a managerial class around them. It's not one managerial class. There's factions, many of whom have a vested financial interest to say if they're proximal to the president, some of those people might lose their proximity to the presidency if a different figurehead that comes in. So there'll be competing factions. But all I'll say for right now is play this forward. I think there is still a decent likelihood that it's not Biden that we're actually running against. But you asked a different question.
I want to give you my concerns.
Yeah.
That I saw. I saw a flip on Bud Light. I read an article in the Federalist that says he flipped on Bud Light and that they're not that woke and gave some bullshit on, oh, well, they hire veterans. Well, every major company in the U.S. hires fucking veterans, so that's not an excuse.
Because we got a lot of veterans.
The next thing I saw, which was about 2 weeks later, was the TikTok thing, which I know you don't think we should ban TikTok.
It's at different grounds I can talk to you about.
I do.
Okay.
I think we should ban it. And the last one I saw was him saying that he's buddies with Xi Jinping and that he wants to bring Chinese auto manufacturing into the country to supply Americans with jobs. But China has more industrial robots than anybody in the world, so that wouldn't be a major manufacturing job for Americans. Yeah.
So and I just want to say one word about, you look at most of the apps, and many of the major apps in the app stores, not just TikTok, are Chinese apps. And many of the user data transfers to China are actually coming from US companies. So where you and I may not be that different, which is I say ban the behavior.
Okay.
Any forced data transfer to the CCP, ban it. Any turnover of CCP interference in what a company does in the United States of America, ban that. Make that a crime in the United States of America. The irony of that is that's going to ensnare not just one Chinese company, that's going to end up ensnaring a lot of US companies too. And that's why there's reluctance to take that broad of an approach, because a lot of companies in Silicon Valley, supposedly American companies, would actually be guilty of the same behavior. So in some sense, I would go far further to actually solve the problem, as opposed to using this thing with people who haven't given a damn about the threat that China proposes, somehow signing up for this. I view it's a skeptical charade and a sideshow. But put that to one side. Back to your question. Look, I ran for president for a reason, right? I believe that we should be uncompromising about the ideals that made this country great the first time around. And that's actually how we're going to unite the country, not through some sort of median compromise approach. That being said, I do think that, is any of us perfect as a human being or as a leader? No. We're fallen human beings. Okay, that's what makes us human and not gods. But I do think that unambiguously, Donald Trump is going to be the best person in the race, certainly, by far, to lead this country forward. And I think he's going to be not a good president, but I think he has the potential to be a president in the second term even greater than the one that he was in the first. And I think he had a great first term. I said it on the debate stage. I think he's the best president we've had in the 21st century. People really turned their heads at that one. So wait a minute, let's just go down the list. George Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden. It's not even close. Who was the best president of the 21st century? It was Donald Trump. And that was in his first term. And I think in that second term, I truly believe he has an opportunity to go further, because he has, like any human being would, learned a lot from that first term. He came in, as I would have, as an outsider, without that experience in the government, but has learned, and I've seen this in my conversation with him, learned a lot from that experience. I think some of that, even in my conversations, I've learned a lot from him that are a little bit different from what my understanding might have been looking from the outside in terms of how he made some of those decisions. And I think he's learned from a lot of those experiences and is ready to go now to the next level of even more effectively administering that agenda. I mean, if you think about the way that they're thinking really ahead to transitioning with a running start rather than last time around where it was a lot more difficult. He was hamstrung in the first 2 years of that presidency by a Russiagate investigation that was effectively a made-up nonsense out of a Hillary Clinton-provided Steele dossier that impaired his ability to govern for those first 2 years. I think those lessons learned create the potential for a second term that will be more successful than the first. But I can't speak for anyone but myself. I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that second term, and that he's, first of all, most successful in getting there, in actually winning it by a decisive margin. And second of all, when he gets there, to be one of the most successful presidents in American history. I think that's truly what he has the potential to do with a guy who has the right America First vision, who has 4 years of experience with a great first term under his belt. Now a decisive national reckoning, I think, against a failed president in Biden that could give Trump the mandate, not just in the executive branch, but even in Congress and the Senate, to implement an agenda in those first 12 months. Do I believe that he has the potential to be one of the most successful presidents in American history in that second term? I do, actually. And, I'm never a guy who just sort of likes to, we're sitting in an armchair now, but pontificate in an armchair about what could or couldn't be concerns. I want to figure out what are each of us, myself included, able to do to make sure that we actually achieve that success. And, I think I've been really, really encouraged by the conversations I've had with President Trump. This one's public, or he made it, public in one of his speeches, so I, feel free to talk about it, is take New Hampshire. I had just dropped out of the race. I was talking to him backstage before one of the speeches he gave in New Hampshire. And I think this gives me a lens that really sees a different dimension of Donald Trump than you would just get from the media. We're talking about the perils of a central bank digital currency in the United States of America. You're familiar with this issue? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that Donald Trump's response when I brought that up to him backstage, I said, listen, I think this could be something woven into your platform. It was an important part of my platform, is the opposition to a central bank digital currency. What many professional politicians would do would try to memorize the acronym. And you even see some other Republicans who ran for president, take this approach. And, we'll leave that where it is. CBDC, I'm against it. I don't know what it is, but I'm against it. Versus Donald Trump, who was very honest, says, what the hell is that? Tell me what that is. And we discuss it. And he says, okay, well, why do they want to do it then? Well, that's a guy who then wants the best arguments for the other side. He processes it. Doesn't come to a decision on the spot. Asks a couple of other people around him what their perspectives were. thinks about it, goes on stage, doesn't talk about it that night. Now, a few nights later, he goes back out on stage, and he's clearly talked to more people in the intervening period and said, tonight I am pleased to announce that I am opposed to the creation of a central bank digital currency in the United States. And in New Hampshire, you have a very educated primary voter base that went nuts. They were cheering for him because they knew that was the right position for him to adopt. And, you know, he's also a guy who, I don't need the credit for this, but on stage just says, hey, this came out of my conversation with Vivek Ramaswamy a couple nights ago. And so that just defies everything that the mainstream media says about this guy, that he's some sort of dogmatic leader who doesn't listen to the people around him. What I see is actually the exact opposite of that. Somebody who wants the best ideas to win, somebody who is interested in getting the thing done rather than just to take credit for it. That's actually the Donald Trump I've seen behind closed doors. And I think the more of the country is able to see that, the more successful he's going to be, not just in winning this election, but to have the kind of mandate from the people of this country to do the right thing. Now, is any leader, myself or any other CEO or across this country, influenced by the people around them? Of course they are. So I think it's really important that the President of the United States have both the right head on his shoulders, but also the right people around him. And I think that that was also one of the learnings from that first term is they had a lot of different kinds of people around them in that first term. And what I see for Trump and the team around him now is they're laser focused on making sure the people who they staff the next administration with are really aligned with his vision and his agenda. And I think that's critical. And I think if they get that right, and I think they will, that second term is going to be one of the great terms of any president in U.S. history.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.